What's going on, y'all? So I just got back literally just now from mass this morning, and I always get what I call these downloads from the Holy Ghost sometimes that spark me to want to sit down and create content about whatever topic is on my mind at the moment and whatever I feel Christ is wanting me to share with you guys as an audience. And I'm currently working on a treatment for an upcoming episode digging into the effects of the manosphere in Catholic culture, in the Catholic online space and stuff like that. And I'm watching this documentary right now called Inside the Manosphere, which is on Netflix, and it's a very interesting documentary. Now, if you're familiar with any of the red pill space or the manosphere space, none of the stuff that's actually in the documentary is at all shocking, and it's causing a lot of controversy right now online, either on the side of the manosphere bros who are like, oh, it's a hit piece and this and that, or people who are critical of it that say, listen, none of us are surprised by anything that we've seen. And then it's blowing the minds of people who actually have never heard of this stuff before, and they're shocked to see what the conversation is. So I'm currently actually working on a treatment right now. And in the film and television space, a treatment is basically like a document where you kind of outline the thesis of your project, and you kind of get the ideas together for what you want to do before you work on a full script. So we're in the treatment area because this is going to be a deep dive conversation. Now, for my own background, as far as okay, so what do you know about the manosphere? Well, your girl has actually been around in manosphere spaces. A couple of years ago, I had gotten connected with a very prominent guy in the Black manosphere space. His name was Kevin Samuels. And Kevin, before he got big, his platform was all about talking about men and improving themselves. And then he started talking, to Black women, and got into the conversation of relationships and how can we get together. And one of the things that we connected over was he was really big about talking about the obesity epidemic in the Black community. We have this very prevalent, especially among Black women. And as someone who's in the fitness space, he and I got connected. I've been on his platform, on his show a couple of times. Any of you who followed me from years ago know that I used to talk to Kevin almost every day on the phone. Had a real cool relationship with him, platonic and stuff like that. But he left an indelible mark. He passed away. For those that don't know, he passed away a couple of years ago, shockingly, at the height of his rise to the mainstream. And so, but he left an indelible mark. And he wasn't the founder of any of this stuff. There are men way before him that talked about these issues that aggrandized into what we see today as the red pill and as the overall manosphere. And it's interesting because I think that on the one hand, you hear this content and you hear the grievances of these men on these platforms. And if you're someone who's logical, who doesn't allow themselves to get too much tied up in emotions of staying solid on one side or the other, and you can look at things from a logical both sides of the perspective, you can kind of understand some of the grievances that they have. And a lot of them are really against the idea of feminism. A lot of them have a very skewed view of what submission is, and I'll get into that in a moment. A lot of them have what many people would say, very misogynist, very abusive, very narcissistic type of talking points when it comes to your grievances about women today in our culture and just relationships in general. And for some of you in this space, and the reason why I think it's so important in the Catholic conversation is because a lot of this manosphere talk is actually seeping into Catholic culture now. And with the advent of the online space, anyone can have a microphone. So you got some guys out here who lean more traditionally Catholic men who espouse some of these same talking points that you hear from the secular red pill space. And I'm starting to find some of that a little bit disturbing. And I want to do a deep dive on that. Now, before you call me a raging feminist, which I am not, I have to say that as a woman, and a woman who has a platform herself, one she's built with her own two hands, one that I know has reached millions of people at this point, I would not have a voice. I wouldn't have a place here in our society without that movement. But at the same time, I can stay back and be critical of this. Now, the concern for me comes from the fact that because so much of this red pill stuff that men are talking about and the grievances that they have is with, let's say, the modern woman or the feminist movement. And the record, let's move back a bit. I think that why these talking points are so effective is because there's an enemy, right? I mean, think of our culture, like polarization in our culture is so powerful and it's so important for success of any platform. We see it in our politics. For instance, the political left here in the United States, their arch nemesis is Donald Trump. Okay. And anything that has to do with Donald Trump, but Donald Trump himself, he might as well just slap Antichrist on his head and that's it. Okay. It's the end of the world. We've named the Antichrist. Jesus is coming back now. Okay. And then you look at the political right. Who do they can't stand Biden. They can't stand Harris. They cannot stand a Clinton, whether it's Hillary, Bill, Chelsea, whatever. If your last name's Clinton, they don't like you, you know? And then now, if you look at it from the standpoint of the red pill space, they have villainized two things: feminism on one hand and the quote unquote modern woman on the other. And so these talking points are powerful because of the fact that they hit on some truths. They do. When you look at what the sexual revolution has done to our culture and society, when you look at what aspects of co-opted feminism has done to the breakup of the family and women and men and everything, relationships, there is some there, but it's the extreme that is the biggest concern. And it's not as black and white as people might say. Now, I am in a program, I'm a first year fellow with a program called the Leonine Forum. And the Leonine Forum is it's an organization, it's a Catholic organization that each year they select a group of men and women who are the Catholic leaders of tomorrow. They're people who are in whatever space that you're in, whether you are in entertainment, if you're in politics, if you're in the sciences, if you're in education, whatever your thing is, whatever your career path is, they have applicants, hundreds of applicants in each of the chapters who apply every single year. And they picked a select few of us to come together and to study the actual teachings of the church, papal documents, social teaching, and bring in professors who are just some of the greatest minds in theology and philosophy. And we break down, what does the Catholic Church teach about XYZ issue? What did the papal documents say? And what have they said throughout the years? And how can we apply this to our businesses, to our circles, to influence the culture and to make a culture truly Catholic? And so last month, we dug into Rerum Novarum. Now, that is the quintessential document on Catholic social teaching written by Pope Leo XIII. And one of the things that struck me about that document is how, at the time that it was written at the very precipice of the Industrial Revolution, and how Pope Leo XIII was pushing it back against so many of the things that were coming up as this new medium, this new industry, this new culture was evolving, and literally threatened to upend all of society and what people knew of that day and time of what was normal. And the one line that struck me in Rerum Novarum was the fact that Pope Leo XIII named socialism as a grave evil, and how he was really trying to push back against the rise of these systems, Marxism, communism, socialism, and these systems that literally threatened the American family, well, not the American, the Western family, the nuclear family. And these systems that threatened the nuclear family, that threatened marriage, that threatened the dignity of the human, he looked at the Industrial Revolution and how the dignity of the worker was not being taken into consideration. The introduction of women and children in the workplace. And if you know anything about history, a lot of the labor laws and the things that we see today are because of the atrocities in factories and situations that were happening there, and more exploitation and more. So one of the things that when I look at what's going on in our culture today, And let's take, for instance, this idea in the manosphere that feminism is like a grave evil. And many people would agree and say, yes, feminism is a grave evil. Look what the fruits of that are. But I challenge that in some ways, again, as a woman who has the opportunity that she has because of the fact that this movement took place. I don't know if that is necessarily the prime issue, rather than it was the co-opting of the movement by other systems such as Marxism, such as socialism, such as these ideas that were about destroying the very basis of society, the first society being marriage, man and woman together in matrimony. That is the first society. The family is the first society. And the idea of these other social systems that co-opted something like feminism is what was truly the ruin of everything. Because at the end of the day, the biggest change in all of this and what we're seeing in our culture now happened during the sexual revolution and the embracing and the subversion of thinkers and leaders who were trying to do good for people, but you had the nefarious characters who wanted debauchery to run amok in our culture who won. If you go back and you look at history, this was happening well before the 1960s and 70s. It started back in the turn of the century. It started back in the 1920s. It started back in the 1930s with the Frankfurt School and Marxism on the rise, and how they chose to destroy the West by infiltrating our systems, by infiltrating education, by infiltrating the political structures, and by destroying the idea of God, and destroying religion, and destroying faith. And in that way, destroying the nuclear family, destroying marriage, destroying people's reliance on each other and people's reliance on God. Now, I don't say these things as someone who's a conspiracy theorist or an extreme, conservative. Like, honestly speaking, if you go back and you read and you look at history, you see these things unfolding, and it makes you question both sides, because I don't think any side is to be trusted at this point, left or right. Okay, I don't care what country you're in, because there are things that are happening on the conservative, quote unquote, side that are totally not with what I agree with. And there's stuff that's definitely on the left I can't co-sign at all. Okay, why am I bringing this up? Well, as I said, we now are in the situation where we are seeing this ideology coming into Catholic culture. And you see it a lot with people who claim to be trads. Now, at one point, I thought I was a trad. I like traditional Catholicism. I like orthodoxy. I live by the teachings of the church. Your girl ain't got a problem with anything that the Catholic Church teaches. I'm 10 toes down for our dogma and what we believe. 10 toes. I appreciate and love Latin. I love the traditional Latin Mass. I go to traditional Latin Mass every single week. I'm a daily Mass goer. I go to confession every week. I'm praying my rosary. I'm praying for all of you. I'm praying for me. I'm praying for my family. I have a devotion to our Blessed Mother. I have a devotion to the Sacred Heart of Jesus Christ. I try to live my life as much as I can to become a saint. Okay. And I take my faith seriously. I believe in hell. I understand and know that how I live today is going to affect how my afterlife looks. And I don't want to be burning them pits asking Abraham to give me give me some ice for my tongue because it's on fire. And he'd be like, nah, you didn't listen while you was alive. Go on and burn. I don't want that. Okay. Jesus was really explicit about that in the Gospels. Okay. So I would have considered myself a trad. I love to veil, so you outside looking in, she's a trad, but no, nope, honey, them trads is crazy. Okay, some of these trads out here are drinking the red pill and that whole manosphere talking points because they sound good, because they make sense, because they're pushing it against these other systems that have co-opted things that should have been a good for society, giving the women opportunity to work or to own property or to have credit or to do things that allows them to be self-sufficient human beings, but not at the expense of our womanhood or not at the expense of society, not at the expense of our families. But it's not black and white where you can say this is all bad all the time. Systems co-opted that. Just like Satan spoke scripture to Jesus Christ to try to get him to be tempted and to fail and to fall at his feet, the same spirit overtook things that should have and could have been good and turn it into something that is and feels inherently evil and separated from God. So as traditional Catholics and who want and see the importance of the nuclear family, the importance of marriage, the importance of the community, the importance of the faith, looking out against the culture and seeing that that's not there, it's easy to listen to this rhetoric that's criticizing that. But what you fail to realize is that God is not in the midst of any of that, because the manosphere, at the heart of it, what are they trying to achieve? It's not trying to bring back these traditional values. A lot of these guys, when you look at what they're talking about, lust, having sex with all kinds of women, getting all the money, getting the wealth, getting the success, but nothing do you hear about it being about truly a man who wants to live an upright life or to live in a life of Christ. They don't talk about that. In fact, they will call you a simp if you did that. You are a simp if you want a wife. You're a simp if you want kids, because the system is against them in what they feel with divorce laws and more. Now, you Catholic, you ain't getting no divorce, so you better get that right. You better get it right. Okay. But it made me think as I'm watching this documentary, like, man, these guys, I cannot say that they're all wrong on every point. Now, I don't agree with a lot of the way that they're going about saying things. There's certain things, like I just mentioned, that I'm just like, nah, bro, that's not it. But I can't say that they're completely wrong. And I think to myself, man, imagine if these guys were men who themselves were submitted to Christ. Imagine if these guys were themselves men who truly understood the Gospels, who truly understood the Word of God, who truly understood their place as men, who truly understood their dignity as men. There was a guy in the documentary, and I've heard this spoken many times, where you've had guys who say that women are born with value and men are not born with any value. Men have no value when they're born. They have to work for everything. But women have value because of the fact that we're born with a vagina. We have beauty, some of us, and that's currency. And that gives you opportunities and opens doors for you, because men are willing to do anything to have access to you. But do you realize that that's not anything of dignity? You don't want access to her because you think that she's an upstanding woman. You want access to her so you can have sex with her. You want access. You want to give her things because of her beauty, because of her youth, because of that. You want access to use it for your own pleasure. And that ain't it. Okay. When you wake up from the real freaking matrix, when you really wake the hell up and you really take a red pill, even as a woman, that shit ain't it. That ain't it. That ain't it. And men have to work for that. Men do not have doors open for them in the way that women do, unless they are a Chad. Then everything is handed to. But the average guy, no, you don't get that. And so there's an imbalance. And as I'm hearing a guy on this documentary say that, and I've heard it before, it breaks my heart, because here's the thing. It's like, when you understand true Catholic teachings, you have value, you have dignity, you have value for being born in the image and likeness of God. But these men do not see that. They don't understand that. And then there's the culture that doesn't make them feel that, because we have the girl boss culture, we have the extreme feminism culture, we have all of this happening. So it's like, it's so crazy. On the other side, you have the 4B movement with the women who are just like they were like the guys now. They're like, screw guys, screw men. We don't want children. We don't want families. We don't want to kowtow to you. We don't want to, and we're broken. Both sides are broken. And as you can see, I'm pretty passionate about it. And I'm taking on this conversation today, just very candid, like literally, I just got back from mass. I ain't got no makeup on. Okay. I got this old t-shirt on, I'm just sitting here, I was just sitting in front of the adoration, praying my rosary and just talking to Jesus. Like, what do you need me to say today? And this is what he's got passionately on my heart. So I'm coming here to see what your opinions are before I write the treatment, before I write the script, before I really get into this. I wanted to hear what your thoughts are on this. I look at the trad space, and at first, like I said, I thought it was something that felt like, yeah, we got to bring back the church the way it was. And I fully believe that. I mean, I do. I prefer the traditional Latin mass. But I also I go to very reverent, very beautiful Novus Ordo masses as well. I have gone to Novus Ordo, New Order masses, the ordinary form of the mass. I've gone to ones celebrated in full Latin in the way that it should have been initially. I go to masses where it's said ad orientem. The mass is prayed ad orientem by the priest. I've done all of that. And some of you don't have access to that. And, it breaks my heart that you don't. That's a problem. Maybe we should be asking to bring those things back. I love the smells and the bells. I love the sanctity of the Mass. I want our Catholic culture. I want to walk into a church that looks beautiful, that when I step in there, it's an whole other world. It's nothing I can get out there in the world. When I walk in, I want to be smacked in the face with the sense of incense. I want it to punch me in the damn nose. When I'm at Mass on Sunday, sitting there at the traditional Mass, I laugh because it's like, child, the incense is so thick, it'll choke the devil right out of you. Okay, it's gonna choke them demons right out of you. Okay, you smelling you. You will get exercise right there just by being in the presence of that incense. Okay, I love that. The smells, the bells, everything. It's like you go into Mass and you have all the five senses. You have the tastes when you have the Eucharist. You have that sense of touch when you're beating your chest. Mea culpa, mea culpa, mea culpa. You have the sight of the beauty, the smell, the ears. You hear the hymns and all these things. It's sensory, it's otherworldly, and I think we need that back. I think we need that back in our culture because the world is co-opting beauty. Now, man, this is a conversation that I just could go on and on about. This is one of our more candid conversations here where I'm just bird vomiting and dumping my thoughts so I can put together some content that I know is going to really speak to you guys. But what are your thoughts? What are your thoughts? There's something broken in the culture, and these guys aren't all wrong, but they aren't all right either. And seeing it now infiltrated in the church, I mentioned about submission. And that's a big topic. You got people out there, content creators, and you got priests well-versed in the idea of exorcists and stuff like that, and exorcism demons and stuff, saying that a woman, and let's clarify, they say that a wife who works outside of her home is a mortal sin. And, the issue with that is that there isn't a single papal document or anything in the actual catechism of the Catholic Church that says that it's a mortal sin. But at the same time, understanding that disordered focus on the self and on achievement apart from the family at the expense of the family, now that's a problem. Of course, we can agree on that. But some of the rhetoric that says that, women shouldn't be working, women shouldn't be voting, women shouldn't be speaking, women shouldn't have a platform, women shouldn't do this. Well, it really looks at the degrading of a woman and her dignity. And that's the part that I have an issue with. We are equal in dignity. We are very vastly different in our roles. But to say that means to deny the importance of the women in the church, namely our Blessed Mother, number one. Could you imagine if at the wedding feast at Cana, when Mary went to Jesus and told him that they have no wine, okay, he said to her, "What does that have to do with me? Woman, my hour has not come." She didn't nag him. She just looked at the servant and says, "Do whatever he tells you," because she has trust in him, because she trusts him with her life. She trusts him fully and trusts that he knows that he's going to lead in the right way. But Jesus, as a man and as God, could have looked at his mother and said, "Shut up. Don't tell me what to do. I am a man, number one, and I'm God first and foremost. And I don't have to listen to you. Shut up, sit down, go in the damn kitchen and make me a sandwich. Your opinion doesn't matter." Could you imagine that if he said that to her? But that is the energy a lot of these men are bringing. Shut up, get in the kitchen, make me a sandwich, have these babies. You don't matter. You're not going to work. Your desires aren't my desires. You're in it for me. You're supporting me. You do what I say. That's domination. That's nothing to submit to as a woman, because her dignity isn't even being acknowledged. And here's the crazy thing. What did Jesus do when his mother came to him? He actually listened to her, and he performed his first miracle, and that was the start of his open ministry. We see in John chapter 4 where the wedding feast of Cana it's mentioned again, when he had said, "When you're around people who know you, they don't believe who you are. Here I am among my friends and my family. They don't believe who I am." So he leaves his hometown and he goes back to Galilee. And in Galilee, they say, "We remember him. We were all at the wedding feast. We saw what he did at Cana." And there you have one of the men. He was a nobleman. His son was sick. And he goes to Christ and asks for healing because of what Christ did at Cana. And I mentioned that because what Christ did at Cana happened because his mother asked him. And he didn't tell her to shut up, sit down, make me a sandwich, and go have some babies with Joseph or something. He didn't say that. But that's the energy that so many men are bringing. Submission is not about just listening to someone and just doing whatever he tells you to do because he's a man and he has a penis and he's your husband and he has testosterone, and therefore you must do everything and collapse down and just be silent and not be seen and to be diminished. Because if he were your husband and he cared about you, or if he was a man in your life, his goal and his mission is to lay his life down, and he has to be submitted to God. How do you submit to a man who himself is not fully submitted to God, that he is his own master? And that's the problem with the secular portion of this manosphere and red pill content in and of itself. But when you look at it from that Catholic perspective, as Catholic men, even as men who see themselves as traditional, there is a way of leading that does not diminish the dignity of your wife. Now, whether you choose that she works inside or outside the home, that's on you. I think that's beautiful. And I understand the value of a woman in the home. And if I have children, I want to raise them in the home. I want to be able to be with them. I don't want to put them in daycare. I don't want to have to do that, but I also have a life that allows that. I have this platform. I have a business that is online, that I have worked, that I give to God as a sacrifice. And that I think that any man who would want to marry me or to see me as his wife would value that part of me, wouldn't want to see that completely diminished because he thinks that I should only be in the home. And that's a conversation you have to have with your spouse. But to say that there's no value in women in the workplace, or there's no value in women working outside of the home, is crazy, because we have so many saints who as short of beg us to be examples in our communities. We need Catholics. We need saints. We need people who are striving to get to heaven to be the examples in this fallen and broken world. And that includes men and women. How that looks in your dynamic, that is a thing between you and your spouse. But it goes to say that submission is not about domination or the degrading of the dignity of another. And, women can be the same way too with husbands, and how that pans out. Not allowing him to lead where he needs to lead. Treating husbands and fathers like buffoons, or they're stupid, like they don't know anything. That's what our culture has shown with the dynamics between men and women in marriage for years. Look at anything on mainstream TV, right? There's so much brokenness, but the antidote and the answer to that isn't more brokenness. And so I just want to hear your opinions. This stuff is what was on my mind. Obviously, I'm still trying to work through this because I want to do it through a Catholic lens. We're going to be bringing in papal documents in here. I mentioned Rerum Novarum, Gaudium et Spes, which is so beautiful in talking about the dignity of the human person, what it is to be human, and what it means to be created in the image and likeness of God. That is so important. And of course, the writings of St. John Paul II, theology of the body, and love and responsibility, and those other really important, just like those other important documents that talk about these things in a greater way, bringing in scripture and really pulling that apart. I want to bring that into the conversation so we can have a conversation that is both balanced, that looks at the nuance, that allows you as an individual to go deeper. But I want to hear your thoughts, and keep it civil, keep it civil. You can say what you have to say without having to denigrate yourself to the point of calumny or saying something that's just scandalous and stuff like that. State your opinion and let's talk about it, because I'll comb through the comments and I'll consider it as I'm going through what I want to say and how I want to work this out. I think these deep conversations are an important part of our own catechesis as the laity, and understanding how we can grow in deeper faith and stuff like that. And so go ahead and post those your comments down below. Look out for this. This video is probably going to take a while for me to do. It's probably not going to come out for a few weeks because this is going to be one of my higher production videos. So look out for it. Watch this next video right over here. I don't know what it is. I'm going to put it here. This is the one that YouTube says, hey, you got to check out this one. Oh, you know what? I have this red pill video that I did like a while ago. It's an old video. Go ahead and check out this one right over here. Let me stop hitting that. I'll see you over there.